I'm delighted to have this opportunity to meet with all of you this evening, and not only to be able to come here to this retreat, but especially to see so many of you here this evening where I'm going to discuss prayer. And now, having said that, I will begin with a traditional supplication to the teachers of a Kagyu tradition. While we're reciting this, please cultivate faith and devotion. As I mentioned a moment ago, I'm quite pleased to have been asked to speak to you tonight about prayer, because this is a topic that is very important for us at the present time. We are facing many new illnesses. There seem to be lots of wars happening all over the place. There's the economy and the resulting poverty. At such times, it seems that the best thing we can do is to consciously cultivate an attitude of universal benevolence, and also to strongly make good prayers or aspirations. And so I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you about prayer or aspiration and its benefits and its results. Whether someone is Buddhist or an adherent of another religion, everyone is involved in the cultivation of benevolence and the practice of prayer motivated by that benevolence. People are praying very strongly for the whole world as well as for specific parts of it. And this cultivation of benevolence and this making of benevolent aspirations is not just the cultivation of an attitude. It is effective, and what you pray for will be achieved. That being the case, I want to start by thanking all of you for your prayers. Aspiration is extremely important, because if you possess aspiration, you will accomplish what you aspire to. And if you do not possess aspiration, you will not accomplish them. Now, aspiration, simply wishing for something, seems useless on the face of it. We often think, well, the only way you accomplish anything is by going about it, by doing the work. Just wishing for it is not going to have any effect. But this is not really true, because the aspirations we hold in our minds have great power and therefore bear great fruit. For example, if someone decides that they absolutely must go to Vajrasana, Bodh Gaya, then they'll be able to one day. But as long as they have not generated the resolution or aspiration to do so, they'll never go there. They'll never get there. So while it may seem that aspirations by themselves are powerless, they are nevertheless essential. Nevertheless, there are two types of aspirations. There are those which can be accomplished and those which cannot. The example of these two that I usually give is, for example, if I think, I need and I want a flower to grow on my desk. If I just wait there, spend months or even years making the aspiration, may a flower grow out of my desk, it's still not going to happen. On the other hand, if I think, I really want a flower on my desk, and so I find a pot, fill it with soil, plant the seeds, and make sure it's properly watered, then my aspiration will come to fruition. In the same way, for our benevolent aspirations to be successful, to be achieved, we need to surround them with the right conditions. And principal among these is being impartial. Partiality, prejudice, all of these things prevent one's benevolent aspirations from bearing fruit. The particular liturgy of prayer or aspiration was composed by the great Tibetan Buddhist teacher Gyamtso in the 19th century. And this is a short but complete aspiration for the well-being of this world. It is, I think, an excellent example to use of what I mean by aspiration, because it accords with the basic Buddhist outlook toward things in its terms. So I would like tonight to provide this as an example of what I mean by benevolent aspirations. I use this particular composition whenever I go to sacred places or the peaks of high mountains, the sites of great rivers or lakes, or whenever I hear of danger or misfortune. And I recite this aspiration repeatedly in those places and on those occasions. So since I have experience of using this myself, I thought I would share it with you this evening. This world is a very large place, and therefore there are people of many different types of dispositions. There are people, by which I mean human beings in this case, who are benevolent, who have benevolent attitudes and wishes, and therefore engage in benevolent deeds. And such people obviously help a great deal. There are also people who are malevolent, who have malevolent aspirations or intentions toward others and do malevolent things. It is, according to this aspiration liturgy, it is principally through the malevolence of beings in this world that the outer and inner elements become disturbed or out of balance, and that in turn produces illnesses. Now, by outer elements, what is meant is the external elements, earth, fire, water, and air. And by inner elements, the flesh, blood, breath, and warmth, which correspond to these within our own bodies. When these become out of balance, illnesses and even epidemics can result that affect human beings and also animals. Since this is fundamentally caused by the existence of malevolence, the solution, obviously, is empathetic benevolence. And this starts with recognizing that just like yourself, each and every other being, that is, each and every other person and each and every other animal, wants to be happy, just as much as you do. And just like yourself, each and every other being wants not to suffer, just as much as you do. This is true of all of us. So the first aspiration to be made is that all of the malevolent intentions and actions that exist in the world, which are causes of suffering, be pacified and cease, and that the resultant suffering of sickness and so forth cease as well. And this is a very significant and important aspiration to make. As well, there are many other kinds of adversity that afflict this world. These are also sometimes connected with the elements. They are disturbances of the elements of earth and fire and water and so on. But in this case, what is meant are, in the case of earth, things like earthquakes, in the case of fire, spontaneously arising wildfires, and in the case of water, problems with rainfall, such as drought or excessive rainfall leading to floods. These kinds of natural disasters obviously harm the environment, and they also can harm or actually destroy beings. Now, to some extent, we're able to work with these with technology and other means. But what is emphasized here is praying that these things not occur and that they be pacified. If this prayer is successful and these things don't occur, all the better. But at least praying in this way can certainly do no harm. This is essentially an aspiration for the ending of the sufferings in this world that are the result of certain causes. After that, one aspires to the achievement or creation of causes of happiness. Now, the aspiration is that all beings in the world, both human and non-human, cultivate the precious awakened mind in their minds. Now, fundamentally what all of us want is happiness. And if you are benevolent, you want the happiness of everyone. Happiness, the achievement of happiness, in turn, depends upon the existence of benevolence. It depends upon people, human beings, learning to love one another and feel compassion for one another and be concerned with the welfare of one another. And with regard to other beings, and non-human here refers to all of the other species, great and small, that exist in this world, you also aspire that they have love, which is desire for the happiness of one another, compassion, desire that one another be free from suffering, and the awakened mind. And that in short, everyone throughout the world be without any malevolent intentions or deeds. The aspiration implies, the way it is phrased, that one aspires that beings encourage one another to benevolence and to compassion. But it is also an aspiration for the spontaneous arising of love, of compassion, and of aspiration itself within the mind of all beings. Whether we are considering all beings everywhere, or merely the beings of this world, or even a smaller group of beings, a group within this world of whatever size, what the beings we are thinking about need is happiness. And if what we want is happiness, and if the aspiration we wish to make is that all beings in that group or this world or everywhere be happy, we need to, in addition, aspire that these beings possess the causes of happiness. Now, causes of happiness mean the attitude of love and compassion and empathy that I spoke of earlier. Because if beings are loving, compassionate, and empathetic, they will assist and befriend one another. And empathy, of course, starts from understanding that others want to be happy in the same way and to the same degree as yourself. So if you make an aspiration for a small group, a large society, a whole planet, or all beings everywhere, for the happiness of all of these beings, it is not enough to aspire saying, may all these beings be happy. You must also make the aspiration, and may they all possess the causes of happiness. Because if you simply aspire that beings be happy, this is like my expecting a flower to just appear out of my table. But if you make the aspiration, and may beings have the causes of happiness, then that is like having the pot, the soil, and the seeds. So the benevolent aspiration that needs to be made is, may all beings possess happiness and its causes. And an aspiration that is formulated in that way will be successful. At the same time as we aspire that all beings possess happiness and the causes of happiness, we must aspire that all beings be free of suffering and, for the same reason, its causes. It is certain that all beings suffer. We suffer in various ways and for various reasons. We experience sickness and warfare and famine and all sorts of adversities and disasters that make us suffer. What we want with regard to suffering is simply to get rid of it altogether. In order to get rid of suffering, however, we must get rid of its causes. And the principal cause of much of our suffering is malevolence and the malevolent harm that we inflict on one another. So, if you want to stop suffering, you have to stop beings harming one another. The only way for beings to stop harming one another is if beings cease to be malevolent. As long as beings are malevolent, they will harm one another, and doing so, they will all suffer. If beings cease to be malevolent, they will not harm one another, and they will not suffer. This is not merely something that was said by the Buddha or something that you found in a book. This is something that is a matter of common sense. And this is why benevolence is so very important, because it is benevolence that gets rid of malevolence. And getting rid of malevolence, you get rid of harm inflicted on others. And by getting rid of that, you get rid of suffering. Basically, there are two things that we do in the world. These are help and harm. We help one another and we harm one another. Help includes everything that we need, everything that we want. Help is like ambrosia or universal medicine. And harm is what has to stop. Each and every one of us as an individual needs help. Others need help. Human beings need help. Animals need help. Big animals need help. Tiny animals need help. Sentient beings need help. And the inanimate environment needs help as well. The antithesis of help is harm. And harm is everything that we must stop, summed up into one word. We don't want to be harmed. Others don't want to be harmed. No human being wishes to be harmed. No animal wants to be harmed. No sentient being with a mind wants to be harmed. And the environment must not be harmed as well. The source of all of the help is benevolence, just as the source of all of the harm is malevolence. Now, it is not easy to actually help, and it is not easy to completely stop harming. But what we can do, and what it is most important that we do, is cultivate the attitude of benevolence, the source of help, and eradicate the attitude of malevolence, the source of harm. It doesn't really matter who you call to witness your aspiration and what style you make it in. What seems to matter far more is the purity of your intention. That is to say, that the motivation and purpose of your aspiration be entirely benevolent, which means that it be unpolluted by or unmixed with malevolence of any kind. If you make aspirations or prayers in that way, it seems that they actually will achieve a positive result. I've seen evidence of this, and what I'm going to tell you concerns the Tibetan community, those who live within the country of Tibet. As is well known, since the invasion, Tibetans have been oppressed by the Chinese. And it seems that efforts at armed resistance or revolt have not produced any kind of improvement or benefit whatsoever. However, one year, His Holiness the Dalai Lama made the recommendation that the worldwide Tibetan community get together and altogether recite a total of 10 billion Om Mani Padme Hum mantras in that 1 year. Now, when this announcement was made, some people thought this is not going to help at all, and other people thought it would help. But up to that year, there had been no possibility of communication back and forth between those within Tibet and those outside it, either through letters or through actual meeting. Once those mantras were said by the worldwide community, that changed. And since that time, there has been communication and travel. I'm convinced, therefore, of the effectiveness of benevolent aspiration and prayer free of malevolence. In short, what I'm trying to say to you is that I think it is of the utmost importance that we all make aspirations or prayers for this world with a completely benevolent intention, free of any kind of malevolence. And I'm going to stop with that. But if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask.
I wondered why Rinpoche made this prayer when he was at the peak of high mountains or at the in front of a great flowing river, as beautiful as they are. Is this because they're very powerful places?
It's because when you're in such places, you have a feeling of vastness. On the peak of a mountain, you see a huge vista. And on the banks of a great or vast, powerful river, you feel a sense of tremendous scope. And this feeling of vastness or sensation of vastness allows you to think big, to actually think in terms of greater scope, benefiting greater numbers of beings, and so on. So therefore, I've used this aspiration liturgy. For example, when I was on pilgrimage in China on Mount Wutashan and other sacred mountains. Now, it could have been that in one of these instances, my motivation was less than entirely pure. When I was on one sacred mountain in China from which you can see a certain part in Tibet, although on that day it was hidden by the fog, and I turned in that direction and recited the aspiration vigorously, facing that direction, so you could say that there was a certain aspect of partiality in praying for the people of Tibet.
Rinpoche, I've always been bothered by the statement that all beings want to be happy. The trouble I've had with that is the definition of happiness. Could you elaborate on that?
The happiness that beings want has several aspects, because beings have several aspects. Basically, you can say that each and every one of us has three main faculties: body, speech, and mind. Of these three, however, two are foremost, and these are our bodies and our minds. When we think of happiness, what we want for our bodies is freedom from all of those conditions which make us physically uncomfortable. For example, sickness, starvation, perishing through thirst, and so on. We want to be physically at ease. And with our minds, we want to be free from anxiety, from misery, from sadness, and from depression. We want to be mentally at ease. So fundamentally what we want is a state of ease.
Hello, Rinpoche. Happy to see you. I've had a strange year in a new place, and I was upset over, I had more rats in my attic of my new house than anyone had ever seen. And I was practicing upstairs, and I got I think my practice fell off. You know, for 2 months this man came, and would kill the rats. And someone said, oh, you could put a cat up in the attic. And then someone said, no, you can't do that to a cat. And the rats ate into the insulation so that fiberglass was blowing all through the house, and I hadn't known it. And for months I was breathing fiberglass. But on the other hand, I thought, what is the point of this practice? So here because here I am instigating the death of all these rats. And then also surrounding the house are these large iguanas, and even an alligator ran by. A 9-foot alligator at about 45 miles an hour.
What?
A 9-foot alligator at about 45 miles an hour. And you try to communicate with this level of life, of beings, right? They're older than the dinosaurs, and they are on a different wavelength. So I'm just wondering, I'm trying to deal with this as best I can, but I'm wondering, if I should just be saying "Om Mani Padme Hum," or the level of what's going on is a little. I don't know how to relate practice with this, and I feel really badly for having been in this position. And
make good aspirations and recite Om Mani Padme Hum as you suggested, and that will help. Most everything else you could do might help or it might harm. Making aspirations and reciting Om Mani Padme Hum might or might not help, but it certainly won't do any harm. And we'll stop with that for this evening.
True.